Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to Work Life Leader Live. I am Julie Cohen. I am the CEO of Work Life Leader, and we are an executive coaching, leadership development, and training organization. And it's my privilege to be here today to welcome you to our discussion. For those of you who are new to this live stream, Work Life Leader Live is one of my favorite projects. It's where I speak with interesting people about the topics related to the intersection of work, life, and leadership. And today is no different. We have a great conversation up, and I want to welcome my guest. So I'm going to bring on Robin Hardman. We're going to be talking today about communication matters, what really makes a great place to work. So hi, Robin.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's great to have you here. And for those of you who are tuning in now and watching live, it is Tuesday, April 5th, about 12 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. So if you're live, we'd love to hear from you. So in the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, please say hello, let us know where you're from, and use hashtag live so we know you're here and we can welcome you. Because what makes these conversations great is not only my wise guests, but also the interaction between everyone who's watching. So please let us know you're here. And now it's going to be my pleasure to formally introduce Robin. I've known Robin some time. We met through our interest and passion around work-life balance and what makes work great. So I'm going to be formal and read your bio, Robin, and then you can add anything else you want. But Robin Hardman is founder and president of Robin Hardman Communications, and she's an award-winning writer who helps companies of all sizes tell their stories in employee communications, corporate awards, applications, recruitment materials, and more. While her writing covers a wide range of topics, her particular content expertise is in best practice workplace policies and practices, from open communication to flexibility to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a result of her many years immersion in these areas, she's helped dozens of companies strut their stuff in best places to work list submissions. So welcome again, Robin.
Thank you.
Such interesting work you have. And I see we have some folks here. Hi, Mona. Nice to see you, Mona. And I know Mona, and hopefully I assume you're calling in from Georgia, unless you're somewhere else. But welcome, Mona. And again, this is Work Life Leader Live, and we're talking about communication matters, what really makes a great place to work. So if you're watching live, please let us know you're here on Tuesday, April 5th, 12 p.m. Eastern US. All right, Robin, enough intro. Okay. We're here. So for those of you who've watched our previous Work Life Leader Lives, I always like to start with an icebreaker. And I have my guest answer as well as audience members, and I'll answer. So since we're talking about great places to work and the communication part of that, the first question is to Robin. Can you share something that has made a great place to work for you personally, something that has been great about a place you've worked in the past or present?
Right. Okay. So it's been a long time since I worked in a workplace that I didn't run. So, but my very first job that was in the area, professional, job in the area of really work-life balance, was working for what was then a little company called Work Family Directions. It was a consulting firm in Boston. much of it got bought by Ceridian later, so you know their stuff. And we were a really small company, and we would all go to lunch together. There was a cafeteria, and we would all go to lunch together, including the president and founder, Fran Rogers. And we would sit around the table every day and talk about, dumb stuff and important stuff. And that was one of the things that made it a great place to work. That level of just informal daily communication with, I was one of the most junior people, and there I was sitting at the table with the most senior people. It was a great thing.
That's awesome. So the connection, the community, the engagement, and having a network, having people that you like to be with. Awesome.
Right.
All right. So we have a few more folks here. I want to welcome Rose Rogers. Hi, Rose, and Bill Hyman from Philadelphia. Glad you're with us. So I always like to now turn the icebreaker over to anyone who's watching. So I'll remind you what it was. Since we are talking about part of what we're talking about is what makes a great place to work. I'd love to hear from you if you're watching. What has been one factor that has made a great place to work for you personally? This is even if you're in charge of an HR function and that's your job to do for your organization. Make this personal. What has been important to you, a factor in making a great place to work? I think mine is similar, Robin. We're similar also in that it's been 20 plus years since I've worked for someone else. I really like working for Work Life Leader Live, my company, because I've been fortunate enough to have a great team I work with, and a lot of flexibility and a lot of creativity. So those are factors that are really important to me. But looking back, when I was an employee, in all of the jobs, it was really about the people I worked with, and often one or two peers that really made the difference. Either someone that kind of nurtured and mentored me, not a formal mentor, or someone that was there for those informal conversations. So relationships really mattered most to me. And I would say having work that was interesting, not too overwhelming, like not too scary, like not too challenging, but challenging enough. So that was important to me. I'm curious, before I go to the audience and see theirs, just your thoughts on my answer, your answer. What do you see in kind of in your work?
Absolutely. I mean, relationships, one of the questions that they used to at least ask on Great Place to Work surveys is, do you have a best friend at work? That actually made a difference. And I should say two of my best friends now are ones that I met at the next job I had after that, which was more than 20 years ago. And we're still, extremely close. So that's really important. And also what you said about feeling like the work was meaningful, that is absolutely key. Not everyone's lucky enough to have a job where it feels that meaningful, but just having a sense of mission, of having that you understand why you're there and what your organization is doing and what your role is in it is really, really key.
Great. All right. So let's see. We have Mona Kelly mentioned a great place to work for her it meant high engagement. I'd be curious what that means, Mona. So if you want to share a little more of like what that actually looked like for you, I'd love to hear that. And anyone else who wants to share, we'll come back to these. I'll pull them into our discussion. Things that have made a great place to work for you, a trait, a characteristic, a situation. We'd love to hear from you. So please, again, share any thoughts, comments, and questions in your chat box. That's where we'll respond. That's where we'll answer questions. And again, I want to remind you, I'm talking with Robin Hardman. She's a writer, consultant, and president of Robin Hardman Communications. So I want to get to communications. That's your expertise. Tell us a little bit more about kind of why we're talking about communications in relationship to, in context of Great Place to Work.
Well, communications are kind of the They're the whole thing. You're excused.
A live sneeze.
Gesundheit.
Yes, exactly. The human sneezes that sometimes happen.
Right. That's an example of a human communication, which is a key.
Yeah.
Everything tends to come down to communications, I think, in the whole world, but certainly in a great workplace. So great workplaces, as I mentioned a minute ago, are mission driven. You can't get everyone on board with your mission unless they really understand what it is and what their role is in it, and that involves communications. Great communications are inclusive. Same thing. Everybody's not going to feel included unless they know what's going on, and ideally are invited to have some input into that. Communications inspire trust and respect. Those are key to great workplaces. And on a really, basic level, great workplaces have great programs and policies to support employees. But you can have all the great policies and programs in the world if your employees don't know about them, don't know how to use them, don't become aware of them at the moment they need them.
Right.
Then they're completely useless. So
yeah. So this is really interesting. So I'm a fan of yours, and I think this conversation, just so our audience knows, is going to take two paths. You can share your expertise around both internal communications and external communications, around projects like you do around great places to work. So
right.
Already, and just from what you just shared there, we could go on to a million tangents. So hold that, because I'm going to come back to you around some of the internal communications and best practices around that. And then definitely we want to talk about this concept of great places to work and things that are important there. And so with that, you can answer, if those of you who are watching, you can ask, Robin and I any questions or share comments around, anything you hear today. And we'll be pulling in your input. So we do have some more answers. So for some reason, your name isn't coming up, but a LinkedIn user shared, a great place for me to work is having flexibility with my schedule. I mentioned that, obviously.
Yep.
How does that come up, in the formal great places to work process, but also what you see as trends?
It's absolutely I work with one company that gets on the 100 best places to work list every year, pretty much on the strength of their complete and total flexibility. They have a policy of do the work when and where you can. So it's very important in terms of, being recognized. I think it's incredibly important in terms of people feeling good about the places to work. It's become even more important over the last 2 years, where people have gotten used to a certain level of flexibility that was never available to them. And again, communications plays a key role. Especially if flexibility involves working, different hours and working different places, then you need to have a really strong communications ecosystem.
Yeah. So I'm really curious how, just because you mentioned about, obviously the pandemic and how things have been changing. And when we had our initial conversation, we talked about the Great Resignation and how that's impacting things. What are some of the strengths you see in organizations who do communications right? I mean, again, that's a very broad question.
Yeah.
Are there, when you go into and work with them, what do you see, anything people that do it really well, and not specific companies, but what makes
I think companies that are, there are so many different things. Companies that are unafraid, again, to have the human touch, to have leaders sort of show their vulnerability, share their stories. A pitfall in communications is being too worried about being formal and professional. And you have to remember that we live in a world where people are inundated with information all the time. And if you have a newsletter, that's an old-fashioned term, but if you have a newsletter that is completely boring and banal, who's going to read it? They can turn to, Twitter any moment. So human, even funny, that's important. Honesty, being candid being able to communicate things when they don't go well, as well as when they do go well. Being able to say, we don't know yet, but here's where we are in the process. And I'm sorry, go on and on. There are so many things.
There are so many things. And that's the thing, we can go on and on. So let's see, we have a couple. So we talked about, so I'm just reading some of the other comments that folks
Yeah.
shared. So again, the issue of flexibility with your schedule. Mona went on, people are engaged in work and experiencing learning and like being at work. People weren't afraid of challenging leadership. So that's two
Yes.
very interesting. Go
Yeah.
ahead. You look like you want to
Well,
comment on
well,
that.
I was going to say another key to organizations that do communications right is having them be two-way, be listening to employees in both, formal ways through surveys and so on, but also informally, just having a culture where people feel like they can challenge and question leadership, and they can maybe come up with ideas, where somebody. I mean, I have companies where it's like at the call center. There's a way in which people can say, this script, it doesn't work for me, and here's why, here's my experience, and then they change the script, or better yet, give people the freedom not to work out off script. So
Right.
yeah.
And that makes a difference. I assume, building on what Mona said, that impacts engagement when you feel
Yes.
you have that autonomy.
Yes, absolutely. That's a true win-win, to use a stupid term, because you've got both people feel good, they feel engaged, they feel they're going to stay with the organization, they're going to give their all, and you get the company benefits when everybody pitches in their ideas. I mean,
so we talked about, we may have covered this, but I want to see if you have anything else to add here. What do organizations do incorrectly with their communication efforts?
Well, it's sort of, it's the reverse flip side of what everything I said. First of all, not heeding the classic maxim of communications is say it again and again and again. Not thinking they've said it once and it's communicated. Just repeating, using different avenues to do it. Being human. So this is the one where this is what we're not doing right. Yeah. So ones that get really bogged down. Legal won't let us say that or this. Instead of having a real rapport through your communications. Also, I think a mistake that a lot of the people make in all avenues of communications, in and out of companies, is not thinking about the perspective of the reader or listener or whatever. The HR may be putting out a policy and have their reasons for doing it, but what they have to think about is what are the reasons that people are going to want to take advantage of it? What does it mean to them? And so that's a lot of people sort of put things out using jargon and using just taking a perspective that is meaningless to the person listening. So
you said so many things. I was going to.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Laundry list. I could go on.
Yeah, well, it is a laundry list, and I think we can go deeper in some of these that either interest you most, or when our any viewers have any questions or comments. It's funny you said about Twitter earlier and kind of the communications piece. And then you also said about, you just say it again. I'm wondering, since you've been at this for quite some time, how, our attention span in kind of the social media space, and,
Yes.
My attention span is a lot shorter than it was.
Yeah.
How that affects your work, as a communications consultant, and kind of your products as a writer.
I shorten things. I personally, in the work I do for companies, involves the written word, but we'll have conversations where I'll say this needs to be a brief video from your leader, not a written. Sometimes it's format matters. And I when I first started writing content for the internet, which I do, mostly now, the content ends up there. I learned that paragraphs, what they taught you in school about paragraphs, doesn't apply here. It's 2 sentences, 3 at most, and you move on. So, yeah.
I was having a conversation with someone else in a completely different related field, about the arts and how performances need to be.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
People may not be ready to sit down and watch a 45-minute piece of music nonstop anymore because they're expecting something
That's a little depressing.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. So we've got a question from Bill Hyman, and you and I talked about something similar before we went live. Is both Bill says both HR and communications are often involved with employee engagement strategy. How do you see HR and communications partnering together most effectively and leveraging their unique skill set? So,
Wow.
what kind of interaction do you have with HR in your work?
I am. That's a really good question. That's an extremely good question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I mean, I guess when I work with, I often, to be honest, these days, more often, I'm working with diversity, which is sometimes within the venue of
Right.
HR. And that's because great workplaces are all about, people who are interested in becoming a great workplace or known as a great workplace. That often originates with the diversity department. It's all about being inclusive.
Really?
Yeah, that's a key thing. But I think the way, if you have a good communications department that knows what they're doing, then I think HR needs to sort of hand over the reins. I think that's one of the things that I do run into sometimes, where I'm working with HR. And again, this thing about perspective, they've got this one thing that they really think is what's key, important. And it's the communications professionals who understand that is not what's going to resonate with whoever's listening. So it's obviously they have to work collaboratively, and communications can't make it up, but they do have this perspective that I'm not sure is always, heeded. It's important to heed their perspective because they know what they're doing, hopefully.
So what I hear you saying, there's kind of a balance between kind of content expertise, if HR has issues or challenges that they want addressed, they bring the content, and it's important to rely on communications team or communications consultants to make sure the message will be heard and or first read or heard and internalized.
And I think that traditionally HR has sort of the role of cop in the organization. It's a little bit, like we have to worry about employees, breaking the rules, or we can't expect them to. I think that is changing quite a bit. And I know a lot of HR people are not like that at all, but that's sort of the tradition that it comes out of. And so again, that if you write communications from that perspective, as the cop, they're not going to resonate with employees.
Right. So there's a balance that, as someone who came from HR, my take is, no, that's fine. I just have to speak up for all of my colleagues who might be.
No, I understand. I know many great HR professionals.
And a bunch of them are watching this. So we definitely want to acknowledge that. No, but I think there is always a concern, whether it's HR or legal or organizationally, there's always a concern about risk. And
which is valid. And communications needs to listen to that as well, obviously.
Yes. And so, but I think what I hear you saying, it's important to understand the results you want from the communications and, rely on communications experts to help facilitate that in a collaborative way.
And realize what real risk is. I mean, I just feel like there is a way in which, I've worked with people who say you can't use contractions in a communications piece. She can't say she's, you have to say she is, or they are. And that believe me, there is no risk in using a contraction. So there's a certain amount of a misunderstanding about what professional writing and speaking really is, and an unwillingness to sort of relax a little and speak directly. So.
Right. And that, so that, it's interesting because I work with organizations, pretty much in every industry. And, hearing that issue to me, that sometimes sounds a little bit like culture issues or kind of brand issues where they might see themselves as, they might equate professionalism or formal language with how they want to be perceived.
Right.
And, I guess, and I'm curious if you see this, but my guess is, depending on who your audience is, if you're speaking only one way, you may miss other audiences with, with multiple generations in the
That's true.
workplace and how people communicate, depending on,
Right.
where you
Right.
sit and who
Right.
you are. Having a variety of language sounds like it might be, um,
And also welcoming everybody's voices, which is, another big argument for the two-way conversation,
yeah. So I'm going to take a break and reintroduce you and our
Okay.
conversation. And I have a couple more topics. So you are watching Work Life Leader Live. We're talking about our topic today is communication matters, what really makes a great place to work. And my guest is Robin Hardman, and she's a writer, consultant, and president of Robin Hardman Communications. Can we talk a little bit about, well, before I have a question, but I'll ask you. I'd like to talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about just the concept of great places to work. I know that's one
Mhm.
of your areas of specialization, not all of them.
Right.
You have a robust communications business
That's right.
around, what's that?
I said, that's right. I
Yes,
do much more than,
yes, where you
yeah.
do communications around all sorts of workplace issues, um, and and so, but I do want to just talk a little bit about that because I think that's interesting to a lot of people. Just from an external standpoint, I know I always see these badges of great places to work, and what I'm just curious, what goes on for companies to get that. Like, I think a lot of people are curious, even if it's not something they're interested in. Like Work Life Leader, I don't think we're ever going to be going up for that because we're a very small organization and it's probably not
Mm.
going to get that
Right.
designation. But could you share just what a company needs to do to get that, and then what you in the past have done to support that?
So, are you asking about the mechanics of getting on the list, or what they need to do as a what they need to do, how they need to be a great organization
Well,
in order to be?
I think both. I'm actually curious
Okay.
on both. Which one
Okay.
would you like to talk about?
All right. Well, I mean, I can say very briefly that different lists have different rules, application processes, and so on. The good ones, the reputable ones, are not. I have seen people on the internet saying, you just pay. It's pay for play. It's not. Sometimes you have to pay to apply, but they're legitimate. Um, and some of them don't talk to the companies at all. Some of them just do based on employee surveys and so on. But others have application processes where there may be an employee survey component. For the Fortune 100 Best list, which is coming out just next week, 3/4 of it is based on a confidential survey of employees, but 1/4 is based on a very, very large, comprehensive application that the employer has to fill out with lots of questions, and then a lot of open-ended essay questions. What do you do? How do you inspire trust? How do you make your company diverse? That kind of thing. What they are looking for is that you're ideally mission driven, that you are really inclusive, that people, everybody from your cashiers to your CEO is included in programs and policies, and hopefully in some level of even decision making. That you have programs that support employees, daycare, things like that. It's not essential. No one program is essential, but that you have really strong programs that are competitive. Like these days, parental leave is a really big thing. Having like a gender neutral, well, decently paid parental leave would be a key for most of these lists. And very often they look at not just what you offer, but how much they're actually used. And what's interesting about that is a tell for how much you're communicating them and how much your culture is supporting them. So getting back to the question of flexibility, you can say, oh, we offer all these flexible work options. Well, if nobody's taking them, nobody's working flexibly, then there is something in your culture that is saying it's not okay to do it. And that may come down to your culture. It may really not be okay. It also may come down to the way you communicate it and the way it feels, based on the communication. So those are, I think
Yeah.
that's,
So that you bring up a really interesting, that I never put it together in kind of that tying usage and communication together.
yeah. Oh, it's like really key. I mean, people, we're all busy. We all get, right? How many emails did you get this morning? I don't read stuff that doesn't apply to me in the moment, or off. I try to, but often I miss things that don't. So another key thing is like just in time communications. If you don't know, it's when you're getting ready to go on parental leave that you need to know the details of the leave, and you need to know that your company has a backup childcare program. That's something that you probably paid no attention to before you had a child. So that's really, knowing about things.
Yeah. So I guess the usage piece, is that stuff that what are some of the core projects besides your Great Places to Work that you do to support organizations?
I do a lot of
examples?
I'm sorry?
Can you give us a couple examples?
That's a good question. Trying to think what I've done lately. It's often just helping draft language for a website, for content that's going to go out, announcing, talking about a new program or policy. I don't draft full communications plans. It's not my expertise, but it's talking through like how else are we going to talk about this program. It's often lately, again, I've done more and more diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So I might do, I had a law firm that was wanting employees to include their pronouns in their email. And so I drafted the letter that explained why this was important. It's really, I've done, open enrollment communications. So like why, why is this important?
Yeah.
Why, what we have and why it's important and how it's updated and how it matters to you. It's always, it's always working on how it matters to you kinds of communications.
Awesome. So. Okay. So I have a couple more questions and then we're going to move towards wrapping up. So just a reminder, we're talking about communication matters and why, what makes a great place to work and how you're communicating it. And we're with Robin Hardman, who is the president of Robin Hardman Communications, writer and consultant. So diversity and inclusion, you talked about you're doing more and more of that. What are you seeing as, the most important things people are communicating around that? So you said pronouns, what else?
Yeah. There was a whole lot of stuff about race a couple summers ago. So there were a lot of communications about like, how are we thinking, how are we doing? The best organizations were like talking to employees about our, how do we stand in the social justice? This was all after the George Floyd murder. So social justice issues and how do we relate? And a lot of companies, this is in the realm of like not only communicating when you have the best news. A lot of times it was we are looking at what's going on and realizing we haven't always gotten this right. And here's what we're thinking of. Here are the ways we're going to be working on that. So I think in general these days, social justice is a big thing. Gender issues is a really big thing.
That's really interesting. So I'm always impressed when organizations are comfortable sharing their deficits, their challenges.
Yes. Yeah.
What makes it? I'm curious about that tipping point. Why some organizations do that so well, and some organizations are.
They're just.
What you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it again, communications within organizations mirrors communications in the wide world. There are a lot of politicians who won't share anything negative. The best companies, the best communications. I mean, if you only share great news, then there's nothing there for the employee to do about it. It's really kind of exciting to share. This is where we are. This is where we'd like to get to. We could use your help. Let's work on this all together. It's part of having a mission.
Yeah. Well, and what I see here, what you're talking about here is synonymous with leadership. Is you want to bring people along with, to motivate, to engage people to do the work that's important for the mission of the organization. And that's what good communication does. So to me, when we do work with any individual or organization, communications is always a part of leadership development, whether it's difficult conversations or executive presence or so it runs the gamut.
And if I might throw in, when we're talking about these great place to work applications, I mean, recognizing problems and fixing them is a huge part of being a great place to work. But you can't write about that for like the judges of these competitions unless you write about the problem and then write about how you fixed them. And it's amazing how many companies just don't want to do that. It's understandable, especially you're talking to an outside, thing. But all these reviewers they keep their confidential. It's all confidential. They're not going to share what you told them to the world. And it's absolutely key. People do not always understand that. It's like you have to. In order to show progress, you have to show what point A was, not just what point B is.
Right. So there's a component of transparency, authenticity, about kind of the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can show the path you've been on and the path you're going.
Yeah.
We're talking about the great place to work, and since you've been in this space, what do you see that when organizations do quote unquote get win or get the designation, are there concrete
benefits,
ups and downs? What do you see out there?
The only down is if they get it sort of under false pretenses. If you have an awful lot of unhappy employees and you get designated great place to work, that's a bad thing. Then you're going to have a lot of cynicism. But more and more, these are actually the people who craft these recognitions are crafting them in such a way that can't happen as much, such as the great place to work, where 75% of it's going to be based on your employee response. And they really look at how the employee response matches on specific points to what you're saying about yourself. So the benefits, other than that, are like it's obviously fabulous for attracting talented workers. If you really do have a strong culture, people will be celebrating it. It's a great way to energize employees. They feel good about it. And there actually are studies out there showing business benefits, that companies do better. They do better on the stock market. They do better, their profits are higher if they're on these best companies lists. There's a number of studies out there. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So as we get close to wrapping up, what do you think from this conversation, from a communication standpoint, what are the one or two things that you think, our viewers should take away as they think about communications in the context of a great place to work?
I think the most important thing is to think of, it's interesting that question that came in, communications versus HR. I mean, communications may be a department within your organization, but it really should be everywhere in the organization. It should be part of the ecosystem. It shouldn't just be formal, and all the ways people interact with each other should be considered in light of what are we communicating, how are we communicating it. It's everywhere, and that's why it is so key to a great place to work. Because if you fall down on that, nothing else is going to matter.
Yeah. So they go hand in hand, and so be mindful, pay attention. And make sure you have the right people in there supporting you to do the right communications.
Yes.
Well, this was eye-opening. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time.
Right.
I'm always, I'm just intrigued by the whole concept of great places to work, but also what goes in behind, supporting. Obviously, the work I do is all about making great places to work, and my
Right.
belief is great places to work are great because of the people who are in there doing great things. So,
Yes. Well,
our
that's true too.
yeah, our work overlaps. So, Robin, if people want to talk to you about these topics, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, I have a very easy email, robin@robinhardman.com. And I also have a website, also very easy, robinhardman.com, www. I chose a
Excellent.
very easy name for my company.
Very good. As someone who used to have you or still has Julie Cohen coaching, it's a good thing.
Great.
That was
I
my
should,
first website.
I do have a blog that you can sign up for and get. I have to say that I've been working on a personal writing project over the last year, and that means I've been blogging less and less. But I do occasionally do it, and the archives are all on the website.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of a really wide range of topics.
Yeah, and I'll post a link to that in the LinkedIn stream for this, because I read Robin's blogs whenever they come out, because they're always interesting and well written. So thank you. Well, I want to thank our lovely guest, our wise guest, as well as everyone who's been watching. You've been watching Work Life Leader Live, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you again. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. And Robin, again, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you, Julie.
And
thanks to everyone.
Yeah, we're going to tune out. Take good care.
All right.